Athodai is a pretty interesting secondary weapon. It's an automatic pistol with at least few tricks up its sleeve. First of them is its overdrive buff that triggers on headshot kills, which gives fire rate buff as well as 100% ammo efficiency buff for 8 seconds. And sadly there's a recoil boost as well, but it's not like we're wasting any ammo even when we miss. Weapon also has an alt fire that dumps an entire magazine in a burst. Alt fire does not work during overdrive mode, which is slightly unfortunate, but it's still very solid on its own. We're using Google Translate to get an idea how this weapon's name should be pronounced, because as a non-native English speaker, it's not very fun to see the inventing words every update. Turns out that this weapon has an actual meaning in Tamil language, which, according to Google, translates to "that's it." But is this weapon it? It's very solid, and I think the best way to describe its place in this game is to compare it to Nil Prime. I think it's fair to say that Nil Prime is completely unusable unless we have the Death Knell buff, which triggers on headshots. Athodai is pretty usable without its overdrive buff, but we need headshot kills to trigger it, which is obviously more conditional, and all that for a lower overdrive buff since Death Knell gives critical damage bonus as well. In my eyes, those arguments lead to a conclusion that Nil Prime is a far better weapon for longer missions and for very high levels, while Athodai is just a tad lower level version of that. But Athodai gains a lot of usability in return, which is great. On the other hand, when levels are high enough for us to struggle to get a headshot kill in a reasonable amount of time, then Athodai starts to fall off compared to Nil Prime. Where our border lies between those weapons largely depends on a lot of our builds. Are we buffing damage? Are we stripping armor? Are we debuffing? So it's hard to say, but Nil Prime has an utterly unusable floor when enemies are too low of a level to die from a single body shot, but at the same time it has a higher ceiling. Athodai has a higher floor due to a pretty good primary and alt fire, while its ceiling is lower due to lower buffs, as well as inability to extend the duration of overdrive. Athodai turns out to be a pretty solid sidearm for any random scenario, and it can benefit from all 3 galvanized mods, which gives it a lot of juice. With viral and heat, as well as a bit of a fire rate and critical damage, we can call it a build. I have a convenient ribbon that covers critical chance and cold. Critical chance lets me use galvanized crosshairs on top to reach orange criticals, and cold frees up a mod slot. Now, a weird part of the weapon is that despite me removing 110% of the recoil, which works well for primary and alt fire, triggering overdrive buffs still makes this weapon have some recoil. I assume what happens is that overdrive has a recoil increase that's not a flat number but a modifier that puts total recoil value to like 150% or 200%. I'm pretty sure that's the case because adding reflex draw on top lowers the overdrive recoil further. But that mod would be hard to fit, so I'd like to try this weapon with a ribbon that has more recoil reduction. End result is that overdrive has some kick, but it's not much. And again, since we're not using up any ammo due to 100% ammo efficiency, it does not matter all that much. The weapon has a rather low ammo reserve, which does not get challenged all that much as long as we keep shooting melons. But if we keep using it without overdrive or we use alt fire a lot, then it dries up pretty quick. So depending on your playstyle, you may want to put some ammo conversion in there. For me, like I said in the Athodai versus Nil Prime analysis, Athodai is very good up until a certain point, and that's where I use this weapon. I don't push it any further. Once it takes too much ammo to get that headshot kill, we need to start compensating for the ammo loss, or switch to Nil Prime. If you don't have a ribbon, you can ditch heat mod from this build and use critical chance and cold mod separately. But primary and alt fire already have a small amount of heat as a base, and the only reason I added more is because secondary weapons have a primed heat mod, which adds big damage. So is this weapon it? It's a pretty flexible weapon, with a few minor flaws that can be ignored and compensated for. Definitely has a place in its game. In missions where time to kill is not too long, this weapon can sing pretty well. I wouldn't call it that's it from the strength perspective. It certainly has a lot of strength, just there are stronger weapons in its slot, but it's more than strong enough to keep using it if you enjoy it. Switching between Athodai and Nil Prime, I noticed one big difference in terms of how it appears to be optimal to play around their buffs. With Nil, I always focus on headshotting heavy enemies, since they can take few headshots before they go down, and that's pretty beneficial to sustaining the buff, which can be extended indefinitely. But with Athodai, since buff expires and we have to re-trigger it, the best way to play it is to focus on weaker enemies to trigger the buff faster, because it's the headshot kill that does it, not just a headshot. So there's a bit of a learning curve to it to know when to focus and on who. In conclusion, despite its name, I wouldn't say that this weapon is it, as in the last secondary weapon you'll ever need. But as a fun and strong weapon that covers a few things people need, that's definitely it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.